If people aren't sick, you don't need to go to the doctors. So, while people are like the gut bacteria now, they're talking about all of these things, but the causative factor is always starting in the mouth. But they're trying to fix something that's somewhere else, but it's not addressing the root cause. And, all of the things that I talk about are provable, not with just one scientific paper, with a multitude. I look at this stuff every day, and more and more research keeps coming out. And it's so sad because people are suffering and they're getting sick for nothing. We have 180 million plus people in this country that are walking around with this stuff in their head. It's beyond my wildest dreams that I still have to fight this, more than almost 30 years later. It's nuts. But I'm going to until it's over. Joe Latipo also said maternal amalgam fillings lead to a significant increase in the mercury levels in fetal and infant brain tissues, which may increase the risk of delayed neurodevelopment in children. I mean, for God's sake, does anybody have a chance? The greatest risk of mercury exposure is upon placement and removal of mercury amalgams. Therefore, at this time, it's not recommended to remove or replace intact amalgam fillings unless medically necessary. And it's really because there's not enough people out there that know how to remove it safely. And that's the honest to God's truth, man.
Welcome back to the Gamma Seeker broadcast. Today I have Anita Tibau. I have been very much looking forward to this conversation because she is an expert and an advocate on mercury fillings within the body. I would love to meet you in person, Anita, because you are based in Tampa. I was just up there last year for a medical conference about dentistry called Dental Alchemy. And that was the first time I was exposed to how standard orthodontic practices are limiting people's health. And that was led by Dr. Jalal. He's an amazing dentist out of Australia. So it was kind of, wonderful to have him over here on the other side of the world. And he was discussing how braces and the mouth implants for developing children, how it can lock up the skull plates and block the movement of CSF fluid. And he was pitching a very old school way to help developing children still have straight teeth, but in a much less restrictive way so that the jaw doesn't become deformed and the tongue doesn't become too big. And he was talking about a Tony Ansel theory of a different kinesiology way of measuring how the fulcrum of the jaw was working. And there was a number of people that were there that had very early on braces. And he was doing these techniques on him that were pretty incredibly profound. And since that juncture, I've been looking at dentistry a little bit differently and realizing that many of the dentists that I think are on the leading edge are actually looking at breathing techniques and mewing as a very important part of healthy dentistry practices. Some of them are even working with some orthopedics that are adjusting the sphenoid bone, which is the one that holds the jaw in place. And they're also teaching a posterior tongue lift. So as I've been teaching Mighty Breath, which I built for singers, a lot of dentists have reached out to me because their teeth are being corrected. They're having less cavities, and this posterior tongue lift is creating more room in the mouth. So as I've been getting into dentistry practices, I interviewed Dr. Bernardo Valero, who is a chelation expert, detox specialist, and he was talking about amoride. And during that conversation, your name came up about 18 times. And I was like, wow, I really want to meet this woman. So I got your book, Chew on This, But Don't Swallow. And it's been a lot to wrap my mind around, but I was immediately interested in going through the detox that you guys recommend for mercury. And I've put myself and my family on it for the last 3 weeks. So I can speak now to the price point, the dosage that is available, how it feels in the body. And I really wanted to have you come on to start to reinforce the storyline of how confused the dentistry practices have gotten in the last 80 years and what we can do to start correcting it. Because as you were saying, this is affecting half of the US population, and many dentists are not yet equipped to help remove the mercury from the mouth. So let's start with, what is your mission?
Well, my mission is a global ban on mercury in the dental sector. That's first and foremost. And in conjunction with that, my mission is to transform dentistry into what it should be versus what it is today. And that's a big ask, but knowledge is out there and it's available. And the thing about dentistry is it's the foundation of whole body health. Your mouth is the driver of how you will live your life and how healthy you will be or not healthy. And usually it starts with going to the dentist as a child. And it's a lot. It's a lot of information, but I discovered first and foremost that mercury is the most toxic non-radioactive material known to man. And in 2016, a paper was published that shows that over 180 million U.S. citizens currently have this in their mouth today. And this is beyond criminal. We have a global treaty. It's called the Minamata Convention on Mercury Treaty. And I have been a participant in this process at the UN level for 25 years. And dentistry, that mercury-containing fillings, is the only thing in the treaty that is on a phase-down approach, which means someday in the future, maybe they'll ban it. Meanwhile, blood pressure cuffs, thermometers, light bulbs, batteries, and all of these other products and processes that contain mercury have already been banned. Vaccine containing mercury was not in the treaty because they said we cannot supply individual vaccines to developing countries because they don't have the storage facilities, which is all BS. And fortunately, because of this new administration and Bobby Kennedy, they have mandated a ban on all mercury-containing vaccines. So actually, the last use of mercury in the human body that we know of is mercury dental amalgam. And this is beyond criminal at this stage of the game. It really is. We're poisoning people for profit, and this really must stop.
So what should dentistry look like in your world? What would we come back to?
Well, you got to go back in time. Weston Price was one of the forefathers of what dentistry should look like, and he published two amazing books in the 1920s on dentistry, but he also studied nutrition and root canals, metals in the mouth, and all of these procedures that they were doing even back then. He showed how bad they are. So, while I start with mercury, because without banning mercury, what's the point? When so many people currently have it in their mouth. And you mentioned earlier about the safe removal. Well, we know that there are not enough dentists on the planet. If you stopped using mercury today to remove all the mercury that sits inside people's heads around the world, it's not happening. But at the minimum, as Dr. Olimpio Faisal Pinto, who's really the forefather of mercury-free dentistry from Brazil, said, at least we may not be able to save everyone, but we could stop poisoning them. And that's a profound statement because we are allowing today in 2025 the continuation of people to be poisoned for nothing. There's no excuse anymore. So how would I see dentistry? I would see dentistry based on the concept of the beginnings of Weston Price, Olimpio Pinto, following Hal Huggins, who came later, and Hal Huggins developed what was called a full dental revision. Now, he studied the work of Weston Price, and he met Olimpio Pinto in the early 70s. And I'm giving you a backstory because it's a long time this information has been available, except nobody knows about it and nobody's talking about it. Just a handful of people around the world. So when Hal met Olympio Pinto at Mexico City at a dental conference, Hal was studying nutrition and blood chemistry. And Olympio obviously was very knowledgeable on removing mercury. And he told Hal, listen, the reason why your patients are not getting better is because you're not taking the mercury out. And Hal said, well, mercury's stable in the mouth, the ADA says, and, it's not a problem, blah, blah, blah. And Olympio said, listen, take your sickest patients and remove the mercury and see what happens. Well, Hal did that simple experiment and it changed his life forever, which in fact changed this whole story. So Hal became an advocate. He lost his license to practice dentistry because as the dental boards rule the roost, so to speak, they determine who's doing the right things and who's doing the wrong things. In the meantime, Hal was taking out mercury fillings that they said were serviceable and good. And he lost his license because of that. And eventually they wanted to give him his license back. And he said, no, I want to be able to speak freely on this topic. So Hal went back to school at the age of 50 and studied toxicology. And he just became this incredible expert on dentistry as a whole. So he studied root canals, the toxicity of those. He studied implants. He studied dental materials. And what he discovered through his research is that all of these things will impact the body. And so even the work of Weston Price doing root canal removals and showing through his research that they're bad and you can't make them good, Hal reinforced that. And now today they're now saying that root canals aren't good, replace them with implants. And then titanium implants came into force. And now they're saying titanium implants aren't good, use zirconia. And that shoe's going to drop too, because it's an invasive technique. And if you have a gap anywhere on an implant and you get an infection, it could be asymptomatic or not.
Okay.
It's a dangerous way to treat teeth. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I pause you? I just want to give some context. For people who don't know, what does mercury toxicity look like? How would someone know, if they have a mouthful of fillings and they're like, well, my dentist has always said I'm okay with these fillings. How would they kind of understand that maybe their problem is coming from the mercury?
This is the rub. Mercury dental amalgams can cause so many different symptoms that it's normally never diagnosed as the causative factor. It could be any target organs, liver, kidney, heart, lungs. It could be anything. And that's why it's so pervasive and so elusive at the same time.
And one of the stories in here is about leukemia too, right? Which I think is incredibly intense. So it's people that have a lot of fillings have sometimes even poisoned their blood. Yep. Am I right with that?
And mercury has been linked to cancer. And the crazy thing is, Brooke, is that all of these studies exist. There are studies that are going back, to the 1920s on mercury. In fact, the American Dental Association was founded on the use of mercury. So I'm going to go back even further in time, which is like the late 1890s or so. And there were the dental craftsmen who they would shoe horses, and the barbers, and they had a chair. So they would, place these mercury fillings, and it was very cheap and easy to do. And then there were the dental surgeons who were MDs by profession first with a specialty in dentistry. And the MDs made their associates file an oath of ethics to say, we will not use mercury because we know it's a problem and we know that it's toxic. But the American Dental Association was founded by the use of mercury. So the dental craftsmen were a stronger lobby group, and they're like, it's cheap and easy to use, and we're making too much money. And that was the original start of the American Dental Association. And most people think that the American Dental Association is a government agency, and it's not. It's a trade organization like the Teamsters. So here we have all these decades, a century later, the American Dental Association is still saying that this stuff is safe, and it's a lie.
So because we were using silver and gold, and the previous dentists were like jewelers inserting that, and that was fine for the body, they started replacing it with a cheaper version of mercury that was a little bit easier to use. Am I right with that?
Back in the day, it was either gold hammered into your tooth or an extraction with no Novocaine. So,
okay. And some people don't know that every single tooth that we have, I guess my model shows a tongue, no teeth, but every single tooth that we have has a nerve flow to it and a lymphatic vessel to it. So whenever we put something inside of our tooth socket, it's going to have basically like a straight, straight access to the brain and then straight access to the lymphatics.
Yep.
Right.
And
okay, so that's why we need to be incredibly careful about what we're putting in there. All right, so now I'm with you.
Yeah, please stop me because I could ramble for hours. The crazy thing is, because of the fact that the American Dental Association became the voice and the knowledge base for dentistry as a profession, it's never been held accountable. And for them to still continue to say that it's a safe and effective restorative treatment, I can show where the science is proving that it is the most toxic substance to have in your body. And there's no safe amount of mercury in the human body. Even the World Health Organization said in 1991, the first route of human exposure is dental mercury if you're not in an occupational setting. And so here we have, more than half of the U.S. population, they're putting it in babies. And the criminality of all of this is that it's still going on today. So that's just one part. If we don't ban mercury in dentistry, shame on all of us. I mean, this should have been done a long time ago. But what happened was, especially at the UN level and a global treaty, we have the United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and the UK have been the blocks on the coalition of countries agreeing to ban mercury in dentistry. Okay.
Do you think that's because they would have to redact everything they did with their population? Like, why do you think there's a hang up? If we've proven that mercury is toxic, that it leads to a bunch of health issues, what do you think is the blockade there?
This is a tough question because most of the time everything resolves and involves money. So people are very forgiving also. And if new research would come out, as it's been coming out for decades now, that, by the way, these fillings are not a good idea. They contain mercury, 48 to 54%, which is half of the filling material. And it's the main source of mercury in the human body. We have now deemed that it's better to not use it. People, I don't think, would take the action of trying to litigate this and say, okay, my dentist poisoned me, I'm going to go and sue him or her, but
because it's malpractice. I mean, it really screams malpractice in every way, shape, and form. So I imagine their hesitation to ban it outright is like they don't want to eat the lie that they've been spewing the whole time. But what would that even consequentially look like? And it's kind of, you're right. It feels very logical that we would want our populations to be very healthy and not have chronic issues. Yet there's a holdup.
Well, I'm screaming at the MAHA group because, they're doing great things. But again, if dentistry does not come front and center, I really don't care if you eat organic, if you exercise, if you're a yoga master, if you do everything right. And if your mouth has mercury fillings or dental implants or root canals or what they call cavitations, which are extracted wisdom teeth, and the socket's not cleaned properly, you won't achieve the health that you would have if your mouth has never been touched, or meddled with these toxic materials. I mean, half the time, people are talking about aesthetic dentistry one thing is aesthetics. The other thing is, what is it going to do to your health? And all this information, they're not talking about it. Even doctors that are integrative doctors, it's a handful in the whole scope of things and I don't know why, because it really will change the entire dynamics of healthcare around the planet, not just here in the United States. If people aren't sick, you don't need to go to the doctors. So, while people are like the gut bacteria now, they're talking about all of these things, but the causative factor is always starting in the mouth. But they're trying to fix something that's somewhere else, but it's not addressing the root cause. And, all of the things that I talk about are provable, not with just one scientific paper, with a multitude. I look at this stuff every day. And more and more research keeps coming out. And it's so sad because people are suffering and they're getting sick for nothing. And this whole implant thing, it really took, let's say in, between 2000 and 2010, it really started to take off, the amount of people that were getting implants. And back then it was it was titanium. And titanium implants, they break down. It's a mess. And then you have titanium exposure, and then people get sick from that. And again, all of these things could be symptomatic or asymptomatic, and nobody's looking at that being the causative factor of why somebody all of a sudden becomes ill. And so,
okay. So I have a question. If somebody's watching this and they have a mouthful of fillings, or they have a few, what would be, and I know there's a million angles that you and I are going to dive into, but if somebody's just in this for the first 20 minutes, I would love to kind of hit, like, they're watching this, they have a mouthful of fillings. What would be point A for you?
Well, you would need to find a dentist to remove the mercury safely. And it's a legitimate thing. And this knowledge is based on trial and error, obviously. There's the International Academy of Biological Dentistry and Medicine is one organization. The International Academy of the IAOMT, International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, is another one. And Dr. Blanche Gruby, who worked with Hal Huggins, and that's the author of the book. I was the co-op. They developed the Huggins-Gruby protocol, which is it's like a combination of both, but even more so, to remove the mercury safely and replace it with biocompatible materials. And again, it's not going to happen for everybody because, one, there's a lack of dentists that actually know how to do it safely. And it's one of these things that it has to be the consumer really has to do their due diligence in order to remove it safely. Okay. Which will.
So they could go to those three Dr. Blanche Gruby or those two other organizations, and they could find a dentist as close as possible to them that is trained in their method to remove it safely from the mouth, because they come in like in hazmat suits, right?
Yes. And
okay,
it's a serious thing, which is why most people don't want to touch the topic, because they already know that there's not enough dentists to remove the mercury safely.
Okay. And then when you get those removed, right? Let's just say that they found one, they went somewhere, they got them removed. What are the what are the you use the word, I'm
materials?
Sorry, it's a new word for me.
Okay.
Yes. What is that?
And tell you how smart Hal Huggins. Back to Hal. I love Hal. God rest his soul, man. He speaks to me all the time. Hal had so much insight that he started to study dental materials. And what he discovered some were good for some people. The same material that was good for you, for example, may be horrible for me. So he started with a smaller number of dental materials, and now it's like thousands of dental materials that are analyzed. And you do a blood draw, and you can send it to Biocomp laboratories. And what it tells you is the least reactive, moderately reactive, or the most reactive material once you get mercury out of your head, or any dental material. For example, if you have like implants and you remove those, or root canals and you take those out, you want to restore your mouth with the least reactive material for the individual person. So Hal developed this laboratory, and Dr. Blanche Gruby, who he mentored, wound up taking over that lab and DNA Connections, which was originally called Dental DNA. And they changed the name to DNA Connections because they expanded the testing. And, Hal really had so much foresight. He was a maverick and a pioneer, and he was way too advanced for everybody. Because, how they say you're right about everything. Hal was right about everything. And now we could go back and prove that he was right about everything, even though he was persecuted like a lot of these people who have stepped out of the medical mainstream and spoke up about these things, But that would be the safest thing, because you only want to do this once. Once you discover that your mouth is really the problem with your overall health, and you realize, okay, I had my wisdom teeth out when I was 20, and, everything looks good. But then you go and you open up the sites where there were extracted teeth, and you realize that there is a low-grade infection that you've been living with for 20 years. I mean, it's shocking. It's shocking. And there was a paper written in 2007 by just a regular dentist, and I'll look that paper up and I'll be able to provide you all of these things.
Yeah, so I had my wisdom teeth removed, and I had 4 dry sockets from the experience. It was brutal. My face was like swollen out to here for about 3 weeks. But I didn't have them filled up with anything. So do you mind kind of elaborating a little bit on that?
You clean out the socket and let it bleed, and then let the natural bone grow back. You don't fill it with anything. You just let your body heal naturally. But the problem is that they're not, most dentists, even doing the extractions of wisdom teeth or any teeth, they're not cleaning out the entire socket properly so that you could regrow bone, your own bone. I mean, I've heard stories where they put grafting material. Oh God, it's all crap. People have had such horrible reactions to grafting material. They use cadaver bone. They were using cow, grafting material, all kinds of crazy stuff. And they're shoving this into your jaw line. I mean, it's not good. And the thing is, most dentistry is involved in aesthetics versus health. When you, which is why Dr. Blanche Gruby, who also right now has had her license taken away for taking on serviceable mercury fillings and root canals and implants. I mean, it's nuts. The people that do the right thing are the ones that are still being persecuted in 2025. So all of this has to be exposed in order to change it. And this is why I do what I do every single day. I talk to everybody about this. I mean, I was just in Brazil, and I had the opportunity to present at a federal hearing, for example, about the dangers of mercury in dentistry. And it was based on, it was consumers driven, as well as occupational exposure to mercury, which is the dental sector, because in Brazil, it is one of their major businesses, dentistry. And these guys are exposed at a rate it's unbelievable. So, if we don't stop mercury, shame on all of us at this stage of the game. I'm really, that is my foundation. But dentistry as a whole will either make you sick your entire life, or if you're lucky enough to be able to really do what Hal and Blanche started, which is a full dental revision, you could regain your life back. And I can tell you stories. I mean, it's wild. It's wild. And people say, well, oh, if you're young and you miss a tooth, don't get an implant. You cannot tell somebody this is the best way to go without doing your own due diligence. And most of these dentists that are selling implants, they don't even know how bad they are because they're not doing the research. I would love to ask all of these dentists, even medical doctors, how many review papers or research papers have you looked at before you prescribe a treatment plan? It's horrible.
What is one of the projects that you're currently working on that can speak to this point in a storyline way? So for people that are, just exposed to this for the first time, what's a paper or a study that they could look at that could help them wrap their brain around, the level of toxicity that this has created in people?
Well, I will provide you with a PDF of all of our scientific published papers. They're review papers, which means we look at all of the research that's currently available during, that relate to a specific topic, and then expose what's happening. Even in our book, we have almost 1,000 references. I mean, the research is really available to all of this stuff, and more things are being published daily. In fact, I found one paper recently that talks about zirconia implants. Well, everybody says, oh, zirconia implants, it's inert, and the same story. They just keep changing. First, it was mercury dental amalgams are inert. Then, root canals are safe. And now titanium implants are inert and they're a biocompatible material. Well, now they know that it's not true. And now they're at the zirconia stage, which is the latest and greatest, right? And what happens with research is it takes about 10 years from something that starts to be used in order to start to write research about something over a 10-year period, because then they start looking at, what are the outcomes, so on. So zirconia implants, I found a paper where people studied 3 different common zirconia implants, and they found a tremendous amount of aluminum on these implants. And so they're saying they're metal free, but they're not even disclosing this on their manufacturer safety data sheet. So the dentist really doesn't know. So in this regard, the dentists they would get a pass because it's not even listed as one of the components of the dental zirconia implants. So, if the manufacturer is lying to the dentist, what else is going on? They don't know. But I can tell you, when I saw that paper, I just about fainted. And I've been sending it out to people that are doing implants saying, hey, listen, you cannot tell your patient that it's metal free because it's not. And here's the research.
So, yeah, I love that. Thank you. I really look forward to looking over that PDF, and I'll definitely include it in the show notes. That way people can have a slew of information. And there are a lot of doctors that watch this channel, and a lot of integrative doctors that maybe are not checking the mouth, or potentially they don't ask about, how many fillings do you have? And I remember the first conversation that you and I had, you had mentioned that there was at some point a non-consent with dentists where they were told, oh, it's just a silver filling, but it was actually mercury. And you had experienced this. Could you elaborate a little bit about that?
The dentists have been told that, by the American Dental Association. I mean, in 2025, if you go to their website, they're going to say, mercury dental amalgam. Well, first of all, they don't call it mercury. Nobody says mercury. The same with thimerosal. Now, it's mercury in vaccines. Let's call it what it is. It's deceptive languaging because they don't want people to know. So these mercury fillings, they've always been called amalgam or silver. And that's by design, so people do not know. If I say, hey, I'm going to shove some mercury in your teeth, you're going to say, well, wait a minute. I learned as a kid that breaking a thermometer with mercury is bad. Is that the same mercury? And, there's only so much you could lie about, But, yeah, they do not disclose the facts that these fillings are half mercury. So it's deceptive from the start. And when I and the reason why I even began my journey in this world, the world of mercury, was because I found out I was mercury poisoned for my own fillings. And when I went to the dentist, when I had dental insurance for the first time in my early 20s, I only had one filling. And then I wound up with 12 because my insurance covered it. And the dentist said, oh, well, you have pits, which are these microscopic dots on your teeth, and they will become cavities if you don't take care of them. So he proceeded to put in another 12 fillings at once. And within 6 months, I developed chronic adult asthma. And mind you, in college, I'm a college dropout. I was a dance major and fine arts major. And, within 6 months of having this dental work done, I developed really severe asthma. And I could not find out the reason why. I went to specialists all over the country. Why do I have asthma? I was in terrific health. And nobody gave me the answer until many, many years later in California, where I was diagnosed in the early stages of bioenergetic medicine, that in fact, it was mercury from my dentistry. And I couldn't believe it. And that's when I got Hal Huggins' book, It's All in Your Head. So that's a little bit more of my backstory. And when I realized that, oh my God, this is the reason why I spent half of my adult life at that point dying. And then I started researching specifically, and this was like pre-internet stuff. I mean, not, God almighty, I don't want to date myself so badly, but you know what I mean? Where information wasn't that accessible. And I started looking at government documents and stuff on mercury. And there was this blue book. It was called ATSDR, Agency of Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. And it was written in 1999. So I used that references in that book, and I studied everything that they said about dentistry. Okay, mercury from dentistry. And in that book, they said if a dentist uses mercury in their practice, within 5 years, they will develop tremors. And then, of course, I'm telling you, you can't make this stuff up. I will provide you with that as a PDF too, because I compiled this information, decades ago. And so I called it the Blue Book. And every time I did a press conference or anything in California, I had my Blue Book until it like literally fell apart. And but the reality is, inside that book, they gave you symptoms of mercury exposure and mercury toxicity and how many different organs that it hurt. And, it was astounding. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so they're still putting this in somebody's mouth all these years later. I mean, it's absolutely insane. Everybody should be outraged, because even if you don't have mercury in your own teeth, if somebody comes up to you or you're in an elevator and somebody's breathing mercury, you're being exposed. You are being exposed. People are breathing and inhaling and exhaling mercury. You do breath work. You know what I mean? It's absolutely insane. So, mercury is, it's the worst of the worst. And yet they put grams of it in people's heads. They use it in the military. They put it in babies. And if you're on any type of social services, that's all you get. So it is a social justice problem too, in a very big way. Yeah. I'm telling you, it's absolutely insane. And so when I found out about it, I said, okay, I have a good career in real estate in California, but I literally stopped everything. I said, this is my calling. This is my life's mission, and this is what I'm going to do. So here I am beating the same drum all these decades later, but we're going to win this. We're going to win this. And the upside is that we actually have solutions to all of it now. And so, one of them, and this is important because this is really one of the reasons how I met you through Dr. Bernie. Our colleague, Dr. Boyd Haley, who is a professor emeritus from the University of Kentucky, and you mentioned that you started taking this compound. Well, he developed this compound in order to treat autistic children. And his study was he studied the relationship between Alzheimer's disease and mercury dental amalgam. And this was completely by accident. And what he discovered was that mercury from dental fillings was a causative reaction to Alzheimer's disease and neurological damage. And we know that. We all know it now. But back in the day, Boyd Haley was the highest grant recipient of NIH grants until he started looking at the relationship between dentistry with mercury fillings and Alzheimer's disease. And so they went after Boyd too. I mean, they go after everybody that's doing anything that's positive. And we all now we have all seen that during COVID. All the doctors that started to say, hey, wait a minute, this vaccine's not good. And how many were deplatformed and vilified and everything else. Well, this thing has been going on with mercury forever. Those of us who said it's bad and don't use it, we've all been vilified. All of us. So
people are ready now. I think more than ever, people are asking questions and taking back the sovereignty of their health. So I really appreciate you continuing to just stay in the fight. I mean, I can't imagine just how much energy all of the little pieces that you've put together has taken, and kind of how many tears have been shed when someone like Dr. Blanche has lost their license trying to wield nothing but good for people. So I just want to commend you for staying in the upstream battle for the sake of all of the generations that come after. And I'm excited to amplify your voice in a new audience and in a new light, and light a path of solution.
Well, that's
people.
The beauty of it. You're going to reach a whole different demographic. I've appeared on other podcasts and I've spoken about this, but you have a beautiful reach. Your message is terrific. And we need to get to the young people because, just because you're young, you're going to go to the dentist. Most people have already gone to the dentist by the age nowadays, 2 or 3 years old. They get their teeth. I have seen them put mercury in babies, in baby teeth. And it's so egregious, and yet the parents do not know, or they put what they call stainless steel crowns on baby teeth. And there's a section in our book that is all about children's dental health and what happens in children's dentistry, and it's really, really bad. It's really, really bad. So the safest thing to do is to be extremely mindful of going to a dentist. We've been indoctrinated that you need to go every 6 months and you go to get a cleaning and all of this stuff, but they always seem to find something that's not right with your teeth. And once you get on the dental treadmill, chances are good that you're going to get something that is going to affect your health, and not in a good way. And it will be a long time coming before you're able to discover that, oh, wait, maybe it's my teeth. And sadly, this new thing about the implants, the zirconia implants, a handful of people that I begged personally, do not do it. And they did it anyway. They're now having problems. And see, go ahead.
So in your own, when you realized that you were poisoned by mercury and you had 12 fillings in your mouth, and then you did all of this research, what was your protocol to correct it? And how did you fix your mouth?
I tell everybody I did it all wrong in order to tell you how to do it right. Well, the dentist that I went to, Dr. Roberto Villafana, is in Tijuana, believe it or not. But at the time I was living in Orange County, California, and there was a dentist at this health food store, and he said, oh, I can remove your mercury. I know how to do everything, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we're talking, a long time ago, decades. And the guy wound up over drilling 2 of my teeth. And he said, now you're going to need 2 root canals. And I didn't want to take time in Dr. Villafana's chair because I'm like, oh, he's treating people with cancer. In the meantime, my asthma was so bad. there were many times that I wound up in the emergency room not breathing. The fact that I'm even here is miraculous because, when you stop breathing, that's kind of game over. So I wound up going back to Dr. Villafaña's after this appointment in the middle. Well, it was like 8:00 at night. Went to Tijuana. He opened up the temporaries that this dentist had put on my teeth because he couldn't do the root canals at that time. Because his daughter actually was going to had a softball game. So her softball game saved my 2 teeth from being extracted because Dr. Villafaña opened them up, the 2 temporaries, medicated them, put me on supplements, and lo and behold, the dentin on both of those teeth grew back. So, yeah, that's a miraculous story. And I tell people that because nobody would believe it. But Dr. Villafaña, rather than like extracting the teeth, he did save them. And he said, we have a 50-50 chance because I would never, even back then, I knew about Weston Price's work. And I'm like, no root canals for me. No. So I wound up saving those 2 teeth, but I did have 2 wisdom teeth extracted. And he wound up doing my cavitation surgeries, and they were like, it was unbelievable. Unbelievable the amount of infection that were in both of my back teeth on one side. So what I tell people is I did everything wrong. The guy from Newport that took out my mercury fillings, he drilled them out of my head. No rubber dam, no mask, no nothing. I was watching with a mirror. So believe it or not, and it was only when Dr. Blanche told me, she said, oh, wow. So you had all of those fillings put in, which is an acute exposure, and you were acutely exposed when they were taken in. And I'm like, wow, I never thought of it like that. So, yeah, I tell people don't do what I did because that's not the way to do it. It's very, very serious when you're removing mercury. You got to have protection. You just have to. Otherwise, wait until you can be protected because it's that serious. And fortunately, I have my teeth. I would have been missing 2 more. And it's a miracle. But along the way, I met people with such a high ethical standard that I've been able to stay alive. Let's just say it like that, because dentistry is a silent killer. And, we know even with the Chinese meridians, and you had mentioned that earlier with the teeth connected to different organs and so on. The Chinese had this figured out a long time ago, and they have the meridian charts for each tooth connected to a certain organ in the body. And it's all true. It's just, where is it going to hit you? So I had mentioned earlier about this study where they were able to show the amount of mercury inside the U.S. population, and these 2 statisticians, they were a father and son. The father unfortunately passed away recently, but they have analyzed many diseases and the link between mercury and what diseases are linked from exposure to mercury from dental fillings. And it took all of these decades later, but they did a study to see what the relationship between having mercury fillings and asthma is. And there's a link. So pretty much any disease that you can think of, you're going to find something happening in the mouth that's related to whatever disease you manifest, or that quote unquote they say you have. So,
do you have any implants, Anita? I'm very curious.
No.
You have none. Okay.
No.
So if you lost a tooth, right, what would you replace it with?
I'm telling you, and everybody that's going to see this thing, when you are at the precipice of losing your life and you're so sick that you don't know what to do, the safest thing to do is get a removable appliance. That is the safest.
So like a denture, like either like a clay mold for a single tooth or a denture.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know people say, oh, but if they're young and this and that, I have a friend who became a friend Oftentimes people will call me up out of the blue from somewhere and say, I have somebody that has dental problems and they want to talk to you, and it's like, okay. And this young girl from California called me. She was referred to me, and I'm like, listen, you had a root canal and then they gave you an implant and it was a front tooth. And I said, it's killing you. You got to get it out. Because she started to describe the symptoms that she was having. And now she was in her early 30s. I'm like, this thing got to go. I'm sorry. I don't sugarcoat anything, because there's no way to sugarcoat somebody's health that's being affected by something that you already know is bad. You know what I'm saying? So I just told her straight up, you need to get this thing out of your head. And eventually she did. And it saved her life. And the oral surgeon that took it out said they had grafting material. I mean, he said, if you did not do this and remove this implant, you could have died.
Mm-hmm.
This is somebody in their early 30s. So she has a flipper, and I call her Barbie, and she's married to Ken, and she's beautiful. And she'll pop that tooth out and show people, because it literally saved her life, removing one lousy, miserable tooth.
Anita, my mom and I have been doing the Amoride detox for Mercury the last 3 weeks. And the first dosage that my mom took, the very next day, she has 2 fillings in the back. One of the fillings came out. So we found a holistic dentist immediately. We got her down there, and the dentist was like, oh, this isn't Mercury. And my mom was like scratching her head. She was like, man, I got this so long ago. And her and I were sitting there troubleshooting. She suffers from migraines. She eats very clean. She goes to an upper cervical chiropractor. She takes really good care of her body, but these migraines would kind of like hit her always on one side of her head. And about 2 years ago, she couldn't really figure out what was going on with her gums. She went to the dentist. The dentist is like, go through this little protocol. And she was doing oil pulling. She was putting like some of the best stuff back there. But it was almost like 3 months of this kind of low grade infection that she was living with. Then she kind of subsided it. She goes about her merry way. So we take this thing, and it comes out when she's down at the dentist. The dentist is like, oh, well, this isn't Mercury, which I don't even know if I believe the dentist or not.
Was it dark and black?
It was. I have a video of it.
So cool. I got to see that.
Yeah. The next morning I was like, okay, show me your tooth. And the fact that it came out immediately after the Amoride, that she took, it's like, okay, that has to be Mercury. Like, why else would her filling fall out? Well, come to find out, she has this incredible infection that she's been living with for so long that there's no pain. So the dentist is in there, and it's like, wow, everything is, infected, la, 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 la. And my mom's like, wow, how long has this been in my mouth? How long have I been living with this infection? How many migraines have I suffered through because of this? So I just sit back and I think about, the confusion, even maybe amongst dentists, about how this can create damage long term. And I'm thinking of my mom right now. So I'm grateful that you shared the story about Barbie, because, my mom's other filling is gold. And I just I wonder if, is that good? Should she get that one out and replace it? And I'm going to
tell you why. Good, Brooke. You brought me to another topic. Oral galvanization, okay? Mixed metals in your head. There's going to be corrosion everywhere. So that gold is never pure gold, first and foremost. And it's got to go. It's got to go. And she needs to do a biocompatibility test and try to get inlays and onlays instead of full crowns. You always want to do the least invasive dentistry as possible. I'm going to repeat that. You always want to do the least invasive dentistry as possible, because here's what people say. Oh, you need a crown. Well, no, I don't. I need you to build up a composite filling so that my tooth still has breathable abilities. When you crown a tooth, eventually that tooth is going to die. it kind of suffocates because it's a breathing, living organism too. Your tooth is alive. So, yeah, man, when you have mixed metals in your head and how many people, let's say you have mercury fillings and then you're a little kid and then you get braces, which are nickel, and all of this corrosion is going on. And then you have your cell phone against your head and all of it is breaking down at the same time. It's all interconnected. You don't ever, ever, ever want any metal in your head ever, ever, ever. And if you got it in, you want to get it out as safely as possible. That is a fact. And of course I have, research on that too. It's called oral galvanism. They knew about this 100 years ago. And why the hell are these dentists still putting in, I got gold here, I got mercury here, I got nickel here, I got titanium implants. I mean, it's a wonder that anybody is alive walking around. Well, we're alive, but we're not healthy. And we're not healthy because this stuff is happening in our mouths. And it is provable.
Anita, do you know, this is like the next question in my head. I don't know if you have the answer to it, is who is selling mercury?
Okay. Oh, boy. You should see my expression. My God. You're blowing my mind. This is a great question. Okay, I'm going back to the UN, okay? My first trip there was in 2002 when I was young and naive and really like, I'm going to tell everybody that they put mercury in people's teeth and they're just going to ban it. Well, not. Mercury in the dental sector goes into countries for the use of filling teeth, like, for example, in Latin America, in Brazil, in Colombia, or in Africa, different countries, that they call it artisanal small-scale gold mining. So that's illegal in the world. It is the number one priority of this Mercury Minamata Convention on Mercury Treaty. It's small-scale gold mining. And yet, one of the pathways that dental mercury is used is on the black market to provide these small-scale gold miners mercury. Okay. So in other words, it goes into the country, let's say Brazil, to use as dental mercury because Brazil has more dentists than the United States and the European Union and more dental schools as both of countries combined, both the EU and the US. So it's a huge industry. So it goes in for dental use and then it is sold on the black market to these small scale gold miners who pan for gold and contaminate everything. It's a vicious cycle. Now, one of the biggest holders of these small scale gold mining, the one that has the biggest interest, are Canadian companies. Okay. So it's kind of wild. The Canadian companies manage all of these small scale miners around the world. But what wound up happening is in around 2020, Henry Schein and car manufacturers stopped, quote unquote, manufacturing mercury dental amalgams in the United States, and they shipped everything to Australia. So now Australia is the hub of selling mercury dental amalgam around the planet. Okay. So that's the long and the short of it. But they're still using it, and it's still being used here. Yeah, it's a big deal. So the small scale mining, it's all, I mentioned this earlier. It's always about the money. And maybe that is the key reason why the United States, Canada, UK, blah, 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 are refusing to say, okay, we're going to ban mercury in dentistry and just be done with it.
Well, I constantly see this when I go back into different industries, right? Because dentistry is one niche, big pharma is another niche, chiropractic is another niche. There's all these different niches, and like naturopaths can't legally work in Florida. Why? You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of baloney out there. So when we think of mixed metals in the mouth, and we think the solutions to this, I often see that there's a jump in legislation when the big people, the people that are, let's just say the Australian companies that are holding the mercury distribution around the world, right? If they were to jump into a new industry and then say, okay, instead of braces and instead of mercury fillings, we're going to make this illegal, but now we have another solution to offer. Because like if we go a little bit back in time before we had braces, what predated that was the technique of mewing that came out of Europe. And then on the other side of the world, in Australia, you have Tony Ansel's fulcrum base to help reset the teeth and align the teeth, which instead of involve, full on braces where you're gluing a piece of metal to each tooth, you just sleep with a dental appliance that's made of like one strip of little wire, and it doesn't, keep that hard palate completely immobile so that things can grow and move. What would be the solution that could jump us to that next level? And like that, I have hope that as soon as the people that are making billions on mercury, when they find the solution, then they pass the legislation, then they make billions on the next thing. You know what I mean? That's the trend I see, is it's like the evil guys have to get into the new thing because consumers, and this is why education is so important. Consumers have more power than anything to shift markets. And when a group of people start to come into their dentist and say, oh, no, absolutely not, you're going to remove this and then you're going to do this process, that's when I see companies take shape. Because, most dentists or like most doctors, when they graduate school, it's so much to just deal with patient after patient after patient that needs. My ex-husband was a doctor, and I got to see kind of firsthand the intense need for them to kind of give and be present. And it doesn't leave a lot of time for research unless that doctor truly, enjoys being on the front edge. You can just get locked into a rhythm for 30 straight years and just, you're doing the same protocols that you graduated with. And you kind of don't question because you want to, show up and do the best that you can for your clients. So if we were to kind of fast forward and it's banned tomorrow, what do you think the solutions that we could offer people would look like?
You really gave a great explanation of how this entire system is working. And it's true. These guys, they get out of school, they have, an educational bill for like a couple 100,000 or more, or $500,000 by now, who knows?
And most doctors don't pay that off, by the way. People often assume, oh, you're a doctor, you make great money. Most of them are still in debt in their 60s. They're just still paying on their student loans.
Insane. It's insane. The entire system, we need a gut job in the entire system, sincerely. But there's solutions. There have been solutions, and I'm going to talk about this one now. And this is specifically for underdeveloped countries or remote areas anywhere on the planet. Let's just call it anywhere, because there's remote areas in the United States where people don't have access to dental care. It's a thing. It's a fact. And it's called atraumatic restorative treatment. Okay. And the acronym for that is called ART. And ART they did the first studies on this in the 1980s. I want to say it was in Zimbabwe. And it is a technique that you use like a paste. So you don't need a dental drill, no electricity, no water, no nothing. You have some hand tools, and you're able to use your hand tools to clean the area where there's decay. And then you plop this paste, we'll call it a paste, and it gets hard on its own, and then you're done. And when I started talking about art at the UN, you could, there are evil people there. Let me tell you, I'm telling you, people have this vision of the United Nations, which I did myself, as, oh my God, this is the umbrella of the world where I can go and speak and help the whole planet, improve their health through dentistry, right? Well, the forces working against me are the World Dental Federation, first and foremost, which is an arm of the American Dental Association. It's all the same bunch, and the World Health Organization. So when the current administration said we want to get out of the World Health Organization, I did the Snoopy dance. I'm like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I ever heard, because they're part of the criminal corporation that is maintaining disease instead of health on the planet. And they're the guys that are supposed to be protecting, global health. So back to art. They developed this technique in order for developing countries and remote places to have access to dental care where you didn't really need any type of serious training. They said they call them dental nurses. Dental nurses could do it. It was like a dental hygienist can do this and fix people's teeth. And when I brought that up in what they call the plenary, oh my God, everybody's like, oh, but you can't use it on the amount of arguments. And mind you, there's so much research on art, and I'm a beast when it comes to, don't tell me this crap and lie to the people that really need this information. And you're up here, the World Dental Association said, oh, but art can't be used in everywhere. Oh yeah, it can.
So I think I've seen an image of this being done, and it's almost like it looks like a piece of white clay. And forgive me if I'm wrong. Is it made of like pearl or something? And you can like take it and fold it, and like you could do it at home. And you can like I saw this woman, and she had a tooth that's gone. She doesn't have a dental implant, and she took this little piece of clay that was biocompatible, I'm pretty sure. And then she molded it into the shape of her tooth and then stuck it in a cup of coffee for like 10 seconds to make it the color of her other teeth, and then popped it in, and it looked just like a tooth. So when you say art, is that kind of, am I thinking of the right thing?
This is a little different, and I don't know what you're referring to, but
okay.
Art it's a technique, but they use like glass ionomer. It's like a paste, it could have been the same thing, but it's a specific dental material that they developed in order to do this type of treatment. So this stuff has existed, let's say, since the 80s, 90s, 2010, 20, come on, 40 years. And they're saying there's no solution. Well, yeah, there is a solution. There's been a solution on all of this crap forever, except, they're not telling the patient that. So when people say, oh, what's the solution? We have the solution for all of it. There's enough dental materials available now that are non-mercury fillings, obviously, that developing countries and people that don't have financing, they can get anywhere on the planet. This art has been used and deemed to be a safe and effective restorative treatment, just like mercury, how they say it, but this is actually a safe material to use. And there's a ton of research on it. I've written about this stuff, and they've done studies to show that it lasts as long or longer than mercury fillings. Now, here's the other thing about mercury fillings. When they're putting them in, they're not telling the patient, by the way, when we use a mercury filling, they don't call it mercury. When we put in our silver filling, we have to drill away good tooth structure in order for it to be implanted in your teeth. When you over drill teeth, eventually that tooth, because the mercury expands and contracts, will break the teeth. And then you need a crown. And then you're on that treadmill thing. So they're not telling you, by the way, it's the most toxic non-radioactive material known to man. We're going to put grams of it in your head. And by the way, we have to destroy your good tooth structure in order to put it in, because otherwise it'll fall out. It's insanity, but they're not telling the patient that. And that goes to informed consent, which doesn't happen when it relates to mercury and dentistry. It just doesn't happen. They don't even tell you that on root canals too, which is the other topic. They're not telling you, by the way, even the American Endodontist Association says we have not found the proper material to sterilize a root canal tooth. And it's, in 2017, they made that announcement. So, it's all crap. What can I tell you? It's all crap.
So my question is if someone has a mouthful of fillings and they're watching this and they're kind of their minds being a little blown, they've maybe been living with some undercurrent health issues. If you've mentioned this thing, Art, is this something that people can kind of dive in and start to educate themselves and kind of turn the ship around?
Well, that's not going to be, well, the solution really is to clean up the mouth to the best of your ability. And that may mean extracting teeth. It really may. And it's a horrible blow to a lot of people because you need your teeth, you know. But back in the day, and I'm going to go back a little bit, there was this woman, her name was Hulda Clark. And Hulda Clark wrote this book called The Cure for All Cancers. And she wrote a book called, I can't remember, I believe it was The Cure for All Diseases. She was another one that was persecuted. And she was doing what Hal wound up doing, which is full dental revisions, is what, you know, I explained earlier. And that's cleaning up the mouth. But she was really aggressive. She said, if you ever had a tooth worked on, you should extract it and just get dentures because that is the safest thing. Nowadays, you know, they have the ability to, with a skilled biological dentist, you can really clean up the mouth, extract the things like root canals, for example, or implants, and take them out and get an appliance using, you know, biocompatible materials and restore the mouth as holistically as possible. And also take, you know, go into the extracted sites and clean out the cavitations. Art is a necessity in developing countries and areas where they have no way to get any kind of real dental work done. But they do it in the United States. But that's really not going to be a solution for people that have a lot of dental work. The other thing is that people have to understand that all of this stuff really, really matters. So by the time people are developing symptoms of what would be called a disease of some sort, chances are good that they've had a lot of dentistry done. And sometimes not. Sometimes it could be one filling, or like in the case of Barbie, she had one implant in her front tooth, and it really could have killed her. And this is, you know, I'm not trying to scare people. I'm just trying to explain the magnitude of what can happen when you're highly reactive to these certain dental treatments, or if you get an infection that you don't know you have. And that's a lot of what's going on. And then people start taking all these medications to treat symptoms of diseases that would not have existed if they had their dental work done properly. And it's just criminal because in my mind, you know, it is the duty of the medical professional they may not have to know all that I know. I'm not a dentist and I'm not a doctor. But for God's sake, at least they should know that you shouldn't put mercury in people's teeth in 2025. And the medical doctors should at least know, by the way, dentistry is a causative factor in many, many, many of the diseases that people are facing today. And I wanted to go back to this APOE test, and I think I had mentioned it. That test that Hal discovered, and it's a genetic test, and also Boyd Haley discovered, shows your propensity to develop neurological problems if you're exposed to mercury. And so Hal developed this test. It's a simple swab test. And if you are diagnosed with a 3-4 or 4-4 genetic predisposition, your propensity to develop Alzheimer's or neurological problems goes up like 25%. It's insane. And 25% of the people have this genetic predisposition. So, you know, when they start talking about the baby boomers and the amount of Alzheimer's disease and neurological problems that they're going to have, it's obvious. It's a genetic thing too. And if you have mercury in your head and you're exposed to this gene, and your ability or your inability to detoxify mercury is just, and you have this source, you're going to be doomed if you don't know that. So people that have this genetic predisposition should be the ones to take out their mercury safely first. That goes for everybody across the board. And it's not a real expensive test, but Hal thought about that one, and I did it, and I'm a 3-3. So I have an ability to detox mercury for sure better than the 3-4 or 4-4, but still mercury affects everybody. If I was a 4-4 with the amount of mercury I had in my head, I probably wouldn't be talking to you today. And it's really serious. It's crazy, but it's true. And you would think, oh my God, how did this go on for so long? Well, we were talking about it earlier. It's always money driven. What's the solution? Like Olympio said, and I mentioned that earlier too, we may not be able to save everybody, but we could stop poisoning them. It's nuts that I have to go back to the UN again in a couple of weeks and say, hey, the African group who really tried to push a ban by 2025 in the last session in 2023. And I think Canada was the block, and it has to be consensus. And so I'm really fight.
I have two questions, and we're going to come back to your fight because we can help support. How did you detox from the mercury?
I think it's Hal Huggins used to say, you want to have more going out than's coming in. And I was able to get the compound back in the day when Boyd had it on the market as a supplement. So I took that. There's natural things you can do. It's also in our book, saunas, body brushing, eating sulfur foods like cabbage, garlic, and
onion,
Epsom salts baths. There's so many things that you could do, having a clean lifestyle, obviously, staying hydrated with clean water. But, the thing is, you want to get the nail out of the coffin, which is you got to clean up your mouth. That's first.
Is there a reason why you're skipping amaranth?
Well, it's we call it a workaround. They have a water purification system that will help to at least give you clean water. And it's based on the same formulation as the original compound. And that's available. And that's kind of the way the system is. I mean, we're dealing with so much corruption that's trying to be exposed and cleaned out. For example, in July, and I believe you signed my citizens petition, I drafted on my own a citizens petition to the FDA to ban mercury in dentistry. Well, I had appeared on some major podcasts and a lot of publicity went out, press releases and so on and so forth, supporting this citizens petition that I drafted. And I have like 66 people that have also supported the citizens petition. And that to me shows me that they're not allowing the people that are trying to support the petition to support it. Because it should be many, many more people. I should have hundreds, if not thousands of people that have signed this thing by now. And it goes to show the amount of corruption, even still within the FDA and these agencies, even if the leadership at the top of the FDA, they haven't cleaned out the bottom part or the middle management yet. So my citizens petition, which I'll also give you the link to, so people can see it, because I have more than 70 references inside that petition exposing why are we still dealing with this stuff? Why? And I know that it's money driven. I know that if the American Dental Association or the FDA comes out and says, hey, we made a mistake. The FDA does have some warnings now, but they're not saying we need to ban it. But our Surgeon General, Joe Ladapo, stated, I guess it was on August 25th, that amalgam releases low levels of mercury in the form of a vapor which can be inhaled and absorbed by the lungs and other organs, and has been found to cause DNA damage in human blood cells and potential impairment with renal function. So, what are we talking about? Kidney damage and neurological damage? I mean, for God's sake. And we have 180 million plus people in this country that are walking around with this stuff in their head. It's beyond my wildest dreams that I still have to fight this, more than almost 30 years later. It's nuts. But I'm going to until it's over. Joe Ladapo also said maternal amalgam fillings lead to a significant increase in the mercury levels in fetal and infant brain tissues, which may increase the risk of delayed neurodevelopment in children. I mean, for God's sake, does anybody have a chance? Women with 3 or more amalgam fillings have statistically higher mercury levels in their maternal serum, cord blood, and placenta than those without amalgam. There is a correlation between mercury levels in breast milk and the number of amalgam restorations the mother has received. Children, this is another genetic thing. CPOX4 genetic variant may be particularly susceptible to mercury's neurotoxic effects. And then he goes on to say the greatest risk of mercury exposure is upon placement and removal of mercury amalgams. Therefore, at this time, it's not recommended to remove or replace intact amalgam fillings unless medically necessary. And it's really because there's not enough people out there that know how to remove it safely. And that's the honest to God's truth, man. I mean, there's only so much that people can say realistically, because you don't want to create panic and so on. But for God's sake, you got to tell people the truth. And the truth is there's not enough people out there in the real world that can remove mercury safely for the masses. And that's where that's really where we are with this thing. But in the meantime, this purified water can help mitigate some of that, exposure and capture, heavy metals when you drink it. But
for those that are interested in more like heavy duty information on that, we recorded a podcast with Dr. Bernardo Valera that kind of went really deep into how that supplement works and how it bonds to mercury, how it's one of the few chelation therapies that can get the body out. So I urge you to look at that if this is kind of prompting your interest, as well as your book, because I think all of this can just reinforce people's direction of what they can do. I'm always afraid of, harping on all of the bad can sometimes make people feel solutionless. So it's like, I just want to be like, we're charting a path towards a solution, and there is hope. So I'm grateful that you're exploring all of this. And it's sad to hear that we're in the same kind of state of mind and like it's around the world. How can people like us and the people that are listening assist you in this banning of mercury?
Well, I'll tell you, I still believe that you can access this citizens petition because sometimes they cut it off. So if people can take the time, I'll give you all of the links and everything to sign on and say, I support this petition because it's insane, that we have to fight to ban something that the entire world knows is a problem, to the point where it is the first environmental treaty that has the name of the treaty called by the thing that they're trying to get rid of, which is mercury, the Minamata Convention on Mercury Treaty. And, again, I'm going to be going, I don't even know how many times I've participated in this over the years, but at least 10 times I've been to the UN around the world fighting on this treaty to get mercury banned in dentistry, which is now the only place in the human body in this treaty that's still allowable. And it was never on a phase out approach. It was a phase down, which means, I could be fighting this for the rest.
What about vaccines, though?
Well,
Is it mercury in vaccines, too?
Vaccines did not get into the treaty. I think I mentioned earlier, because the World Health Organization said, we don't have the storage facilities in developing countries that can handle, without refrigeration, single-dose vaccines. It's all a lie. It's all a lie. But we're sold lies everywhere you go. I mean, the vaccines, it's just another lie. And as I mentioned, they call it thimerosal. They're not calling it, these mercury vaccines. No, thimerosal and vaccines. No, it's not. It's mercury. But they changed the names in order to not tell the consumer or the public that it actually is mercury. It's all deception. It's deception. But the thing at the end of the day is, when you have unhealthy societies, we're all paying. Just because you don't have mercury in your teeth, it doesn't mean you're not going to get exposed, because burial, cremation, human waste, it's raining mercury, for God's sake. And if you live near a crematorium, which most people do not even know, it goes up into the air. If they don't have what they call scrubbers on the flues that, where the smoke goes up, that mercury goes up and it's locally deposited, and then it goes up into the atmosphere and it's globally deposited. But that's not the worst of it, because the worst of it is the small scale mining, because these guys get the mercury from the dental sector, and it's not all of it, but it's a lot of it. And they pan for gold, and then they capture the gold and they burn the mercury and the gold together. And what's left is the gold, and the mercury is burned up into the atmosphere. And so it's local and global. It's insane. So if the Canadian mining sector would finally say, hey, we don't want to poison our people anymore, these miners, there's solutions for that too. And it's called the borax method. I mean, every time I've looked for solutions within the UN framework and brought it to the plenary in my statements, you're allowed 3 minutes as an opening statement or on the topic of whatever's being discussed in your area. I bring this stuff forward, and everybody who has a financial interest, even what they call NGOs, non-governmental organizations, they all don't like me, because I'm saying, oh, wait, you don't have to do it like this. You could do it like this. You'll gather more gold, and it's less toxic for the miners. But people don't want to hear it when you're impinging on their ability to make money. And it's horrific. And you have to just wake up and say, it doesn't matter. I know the truth, and I'm going to share it with as many people as I can that will listen. And if I save somebody's life along the way, I did my job. I'm so over all of this, because I know that people are suffering for nothing. And this is really a hard pill to swallow. I mean, it's tough, man. When I see or hear about little kids, 3 and 4 years old, getting a mouthful of mercury, it would be easy for me to hit somebody with a baseball bat and knock them silly, for doing this to somebody that doesn't even have a chance yet. And then these kids, they develop all of these neurological problems, and people like, oh, your kid has this or that or whatever. And then you add the vaccines on top. These kids are lucky that they're not dying off, but they're not healthy.
Anita, I want to ask you a question, and I don't know if you're going to answer it, but I'm going to try at least. Can we talk about Cassiopeia?
Well, I'll talk a little bit about it, because this is how deep the corruption is, okay? And I am going to look at this link here.
It's so funny how much I can tell you shelter your words sometimes.
See, we haven't even met. You already know me. It's so funny.
You're like, what am I allowed to say, and what will create? I mean, we're going to have to bleep out the V word that we were using earlier for YouTube, which I think is like,
funny. The U.S. government spent $11 million to put mercury in the heads of little kids in Portugal to see if they would develop neurological or kidney damage. So it was a study of about 500 kids. So we'll say 250 had mercury, 250 did not. And they called it a prospective study. So our U.S. tax dollars went to do this study to prove whether or not mercury was a harmful thing or not. So oftentimes when they design a study, they're trying to see, what the reality is with whatever new product or treatment is on the market. Well, in this particular circumstance, they really the study was not executed properly. Let's just put it that way. And then there was another element of this study where these same kids that they had put mercury in their teeth were also part of a pedophile scandal. And I spent 4 months in Portugal doing an undercover expose, and I met some of the victims. And it was one of the most horrific experiences of my life. And I am still working on trying to help these now young adults, which are like your age, to get to the bottom of this and expose it in a way that will actually be able to help these kids, because they were suffering from health problems back then. And it's a very horrible thing that happened. And my goal really is to expose all of it. It's a big deal.
And this study started in the 90s, right? And then it's still continuing, even though the results were very blatantly clear that it is poisoning them.
Yeah, the study is continuing only because they never went back to see these kids. So these kids are still now young adults. They still have mercury in their teeth. So in the reality, and a colleague of mine brought that forward, he said, you know what? They're still in the study. And I'm like, oh my God, I never thought of that. But I'm going to tell you about, I want to see one that I found this yesterday. And you know how God works in mysterious ways. It's a beautiful thing. This study was published in 2025, and it's about dental mercury. And I'm going to read this because it shows the magnitude of what the hell is going on. This study was conducted on 120 healthy children divided into two groups. Group 1, or the control group, was 60, including participants without dental caries, no history of dental amalgam, mercury-containing restorations, and no other dental treatments. And Group 2, the intervention group, were 60 kids, including participants with dental caries involving enamel or dentin, who received dental amalgam restorations in 2 posterior teeth. Okay? Their cells and saliva samples were taken at baseline and 30 days later for Group 1, while Group 2 samples were obtained at different pre-treatment baseline and post-amalgam placement time points at 15 and 30 days. The conclusions of this study, and I'm going to give you the link to this, the present study shows that individuals exposed to mercury-containing dental amalgam exhibited increased levels of MDA and saliva, there's acronyms here, which are directly related to genotoxicity, oxidative DNA damage, and lipid periodoxation, respectively. Exposure to mercury-containing dental amalgams may contribute to oxidative stress and genetic damage, potentially leading to long-term implications for both oral and systemic health. This is on little kids. So this is where we are in the world of mercury being put into kids today. Or if you were a kid and you still have this stuff, and you're wondering the potentially leading to long-term implications for both oral and systemic health, do you wonder why everybody's on medication? Don't wonder. Here's the answer. 180 million plus people. That's just in this country. This is beyond my wildest imagination that I could come across this paper that is the Casapia's story on a smaller group, but look what they're showing, for God's sake.
Yeah, my thoughts turn to pregnant women.
Oh!
You know, who do so much to like detox before, and then, their baby's born with like severe gut issues or severe skin rashes, and they're like, "Man, I'm doing everything. What's going on here?"
What's going on?
And
Mercury.
I just wonder how much of this can help solve the hidden mystery for some people. Where they're going through the protocols, they're detoxing, they're eating well, they're drinking the right water, yet there's this underlying current of issues. And I'm really hoping that you and I have provided a lot of sources for them to consider.
I don't listen, man. I'm the information superhighway. I am happy to, share everything that I do because, I tell people the life you save may be your own, and it's real. Now, with pregnant women, if mercury is a generational thing. So let's say you don't have mercury and your mom and dad didn't have mercury, but your grandparents did. That load is continuously being passed. So we know that really, let's say in the early 1900s, mercury started to becoming really popular as a restorative treatment, even though it started earlier than that, but then all of a sudden, everybody by the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, more and more, people are getting these feelings, right? So, you got to always be detoxing from mercury. And if you're a pregnant woman or you're wanting to get pregnant, and the research is really behind this. Not only should the mother not have the father, but the dad too. I mean, nobody.
Thank you for saying that.
The guys. Oh man, it hurts the sperm too. I mean, I've written about all of this stuff. Nobody talks about the guys, but they're part of the equation.
Yeah. It's starting to come out a little bit more that like the quality of the sperm is responsible for morning sickness, for a lot of the complications. So thank you. Yes, it's like but not only if you have fillings or not. It sounds like it's in the atmosphere. People that have fillings are exhaling it. So regardless of whether we actually have it in our mouth or our parents had it in our mouth, we should be detoxing from mercury.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's so prevalent.
Absolutely. That I'm telling you, and I don't know if you remember this because you're on the other coast. This past January, I was in Colorado and I came back, and there was this really bizarre fog that was just not natural. Do you remember that?
I do. And it was a weird day. And I was like, it doesn't smell like smoke and it doesn't feel like dew. Is this a Sahara dust storm is sometimes the excuse they make for it, but there was no excuse of that. And then a lot of people were talking about it like it was a gas, and people were showing their flashlights in it, and it almost looks like it was a living entity. Like there was a little bugs in the air. What do you have about it?
Well, check this out. Somebody did an analysis. A doctor on that coast, she started collecting samples that was, pulled in her yard. And they examined it. They said that the levels of mercury and heavy metals that they found in those samples, it was extraordinary. Extraordinary. So, it is in the atmosphere. You can bet on that. If people are wanting to get pregnant, they should not eat fish. Nobody should eat fish because of the high levels of mercury in fish. And I learned that in 2002, my first UN visit, when the head of EPA scientific department at the time, his name was Arnie Kosmet. I remember it like it was yesterday. He said, all fish globally are contaminated with some level of mercury. Tuna is the most consumed fish in the United States, and it's the highest levels. And his colleague said, don't say that. And, you're not looking at tuna on the cans and it says high levels of mercury. And then they talk about wild Alaskan salmon as if a wild Alaska salmon doesn't have mercury. They all do. So I haven't had fish since 2002. And I used to deep sea fish. Wow. So, yeah, I want to keep my mercury burden as low as possible. And that includes not eating fish anymore, which I used to love. And, obviously we have our exposures, our external exposures, but that would be your next source. And here's the other thing. So we have all of these indigenous peoples around the world that live on fish and seafood as their major source of protein. And these races of people are actually being mercury poisoned just by the environment, which is the name of the treaty, the Minamata Convention on Mercury Treaty, because it happened in Minamata, Japan. It was the first globally recognized contaminated site in the world that was contaminated by this corporation called the Chiso Corporation. They were dumping mercury waste into Minamata Bay, Japan. And I've been there twice. So, yeah, that's the reason why we have the name, the Minamata Convention on Mercury Treaty. To never forget that mercury can just decimate an entire population of people. And believe it or not, even though obviously they stopped the contamination of Minamata, people are still suffering from Minamata disease. And that was, that started, I believe, in the 1930s, but it was only discovered in the 1950s that was a cause of the people that were being poisoned from eating the fish out of Minamata Bay.
So really important to keep our detox pathways open.
Oh my God,
very, very important.
It's everything. It really is everything. But you have to. Here's another thing that's really, really important. I'm sorry, because I remember as I go along. You need to be really careful. If somebody tells you to start detoxing without taking your mercury fillings out, outside of doing this purified water, don't do it. Because I have seen people do DMSA and DMPS, EDTA, and that stuff works. But it pulls the mercury from your teeth and it can redeposit it someplace else without binding it. And I have seen people get really, really, really sick. So, and if you
consult a professional is what I'm gathering.
I'm sorry, what?
It's like consult a professional when you go through this process. But you really
have to know somebody that they need to know what they're doing, because I'm telling you, back in the day when I was in California, everybody's going to detox. And I met people that were detoxing with a mouthful of mercury, and I'm like, oh my God, don't do it. That is so dangerous. Dangerous. And that's, it's based on a lot of research. You really have to be careful when you have a mouthful of mercury. You really have to be. And it's, if anything, I could give a message, that's the message. You have to know. You have to know. And it's in order to protect yourself. But I also tell people, doing your mouth and restoring it as naturally and holistically as possible is the greatest investment in your health bank account that you'll ever make. Ever, ever, ever. And that is provable too. And I that's why I'm here. And I was looking at that paper. This paper on the kids was done in Mexico, in Guadalajara. So they did this study there. I'm actually going to reach out to the authors and thank them for doing this, but also to tell them they need to get the mercury out of these kids now, these little kids, because they did the study and they proved that it causes damage. So now it's time to take it out. And the kids of the Casa Pia, they still are sitting with it. This is really a crime against humanity at this stage of the game.
Anita, yeah, I am in full agreement with you. For those that are listening, how can we help support your journey and follow along as you are going to successfully ban it?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Well, I'm so lame, Brooke, when it comes to social media and stuff. I have, I'm on Facebook and I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Instagram, but I don't post that much. I'm going to leave that to you. I'm going to send you stuff.
Okay. Perfect. I'll give people updates, but if they did want to reach out and ask any questions, or if they know somebody that could maybe perhaps assist you, or a podcast that wanted to reach out to host you at all, I can link your...
You can give everybody my contact information. But here's the thing: when I'm out of the country, I'm only on WhatsApp. Don't call me.
I'll share your email. That way you can pre-filter and you don't feel like people have, your access to your private phone, but at least they can send you an email and perhaps request more information.
Absolutely.
And your book is an incredible source of information. I highly recommend getting this. It really kind of outlines and reinforces the chronological way that Mercury became accepted and where we came from and how we've kind of gotten distorted over time. So if you're a doctor that really kind of wants to lean into the studies a little bit, I highly recommend getting this book. And Anita, I appreciate you. This definitely won't be the only time that I have you on the podcast.
I hope the next time I can talk and see you, and you can see me. You'll see all the crazy things that I'm making. It's wild. It's I never expected this journey to be this. But when I made the commitment, because I knew when I found out it was me, I'm like, okay, God, come on now. Do I have to do? And I'm thinking, I was just so convinced that people would do the right thing with the knowledge that was available all those decades ago. I mean, I found it, and it was much more difficult, because the internet was not what it is today. I mean, you can find everything today, but curiously, even when I'm researching and writing review papers on dentistry and Mercury and so on, the information is not as easily able to be discovered like it used to be. I mean, you would be able to type in keywords, and now it's really not like that. You have to really dig deeper in order to find what's really going on, and that is really surprising. I mean, PubMed, for example, was the gold standard of research, and that's a government database filled with medical information and so on and so forth. But they don't post, or they don't have accessible a lot of papers that you would find, believe it or not, on Google Scholar. So our government, until now, they have been suppressing a lot of information or not making it available for people to see. And then, in my opinion, that's suppression, because I would find one, just something simple, a simple paper on Google Scholar, and I would try to find it on PubMed, and it would not show up. So that led me to believe, when I started checking keywords and so on, and both databases, I'm like, there's something fishy going on here. Why isn't it popping up in PubMed?
And who is it protecting? What is,
Exactly.
Who is my kind of the initial thing I'm going to research when we get done this call is who is selling Mercury, how many companies are involved, and who owns those companies, because it seems like there is some sort of protection of assets here that has gone way past. Doctors take an oath to do no harm, and we are obviously breaking that oath in every which way and form when it comes to this. So who's the commander in chief of, protecting that legislation is my initial question. And why are they doing that? And I really think consumers can change markets faster than the legal system can.
Yeah.
So I hope that this podcast that will, I'm sure, outlive us, can sit in a very public space and scream from the rooftops that we should have. It seems like we didn't just cover mercury, but we covered also different kind of metals in the mouth and how they break down. And I really feel like you charted a good course for people of, what are your options? How do you proceed forward? Where do you look at, like which boards do you look at to find a dentist that is a biological dentist that can assist you with it? So I'm feeling very complete right now. Is there any last thing that you'd like to share with the audience before we get off?
I'm going to give you, you have to remind me all this stuff I said I'm going to give you. I drafted a patient intake form on dentistry, that I'll send to you as a PDF that you can make it available so people can start to investigate their own dental work. And it's not just for the dentist. I mean, the patient obviously fills it out, but when this is accessible to the patient, they can go back in their own mind and say, oh my God, I remember when I had that dental work done. And then I felt really sick afterwards. I mean, these are the eye-opening moments where people can start to put their own dental history together, which in turn will help their own health history. So it's an important thing. I may not have everything listed, but it's pretty comprehensive. When did you have your root canals taken out? Or when did you get a root canal? Or when did you have your wisdom teeth removed? Or when did you wear braces and so on? So, yeah, it's important. And it's, if anything else, we desperately need to change the dental system of the whole thing. It needs to be restarted, revamped, and dedicated to a real holistic approach. And they're starting to do that. They call it minimally invasive dentistry, MID. And it's a thing, but it's in its infancy when it should be everywhere, And you're right about the consumers. The consumers have the power to drive all of this stuff. I'm here as an information source and to help as many people along the way and just to spread the information. But if it's not us, then when's it going to happen?
Anita, it is us, and we're going to do the work that we're supposed to. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing this message. I have a whole slew of notes here for my own future research.
Right on.
I just want to commend you for doing the hard thing, which is the right thing. And I just want to, rally the forces behind you as you continue like the good work of flying and announcing these things like any God-given advocate. I commend you for doing it. And I will be reaching out to you to get all of the links below. So if you did watch this, thank you so much for watching the full thing. More information is available in her book, in the show notes below, and in the podcast that I did with Dr. Bernardo Valero. And please stay tuned for more. I will definitely be reaching out to you at least on a quarterly basis, Anita, just to hear the good news and see how we can support.
Okay, well, I hope that we can talk when I come back from the UN, because this ought to be very, very telling, this next session. This is, in my opinion, the most important session because the European Union of 27 countries banned the use of mercury dental amalgam as of January 1st, 2025. So it's a done deal in 27 countries. So we have to expose the rest of the world of why aren't they following the EU mandate. So this is the big one.
That's very exciting. So we'll do that after for sure.
Okay.
Thank you.